I had volunteered to present a piece, and she said, well, we were full. How about an introduction? Well, that's kind of like doing the history of art in 2 or 3 minutes. Not going to happen. So I had to get a little creative, and I just thought, well, we'll just talk little basics. And I always start out, I have a background in another museum, and I started with doing 3rd grade tours. So one of the basics is, what's the difference between a painting and a sculpture? 1 dimension. A painting is 2-dimensional, sculpture is 3-dimensional. But it's so important because it gives a sculpture a life. It gives it a different ability. You look at it in a different way. Oftentimes it does not have the color that a painting has. So there's so many more ways to talk about it. How the sun, the shadows, the movement that you have. So one of the handouts that you will be getting on the website and that I have used, it's about the figure, but obviously an animal's a figure too. So different ways to talk about it, the subject, the movement, the surface. Is it a multi-piece sculpture? And that's why I wanted to start here, because we have this beautiful multi-piece sculpture, and I know a couple of them today that we're talking about are multi-piece sculptures. So it becomes a different conversation then too. These He is paying homage to the great Henri Matisse, who did a set of bags. And if you're lucky enough to have seen a set of the bags, they're in several museums in this country. He did about 11 of them over his lifetime. But another conversation, how does that change if you add a bag or subtract a bag? The whole interrelationship between them. You see the progression here. They make sense. What if you took 2 away? Does 1 by itself make sense? These are kinds of conversation points you can have when you're discussing something like a multi-piece sculpture. And even the arrangement. There's a set of 4 of them, I believe it's either in MoMA or wasn't Hirschberg, so I think it was the Museum of Modern Art in New York that has a set of 4 of the Matisse ones. And when they were remodeling them, instead of having them all lined up, which they traditionally are, they put 2 on one wall and 2 on another wall. And so they were kind of facing each other, and it kind of like looked totally different. Didn't kind of make so much sense. So that's another point you can talk about. But let's go. One of the things I thought I might ask about, what is the purpose or use of sculpture traditionally? Anyone? What kinds of things were sculpture? Now, we're going back thousands of years up to current. What were they used for?
Religion.
Thank you. I would say that's probably the #1 most important reason. Most sculpture and art, for that matter, was religion-based, and still is. We don't think of it, we think art. It's true. Think about it. In
Honoring heroes also.
Another good one. So let's just say worship or religion was probably the most important and half of all the art in the world is religious-based. And you're like, no, that can't be. But think about if you're going to Asia, Buddhism, Hinduism, the gods, Greek and Roman mythology, all gods, Christianity, religious-based. So religion, worship. Cultures, they used it for a lot of different reasons to decorate buildings. The second one, somebody said something else. Honor. Yeah. Portrait sculpture or remembrance. So you're exactly remembering people. Public figures, art, graves, steles, sarcophagi, things like that. So very important. Another kind of maybe less important are personal possessions and objects. We think of pottery, jewelry, decorative objects, perfume bottles, glass, all sculptures, but they were made for everyday things. And then portrait sculpture and remembrance, we talked about that. And then just other everyday objects like tools, decorative items. And then traditionally, what do we make sculpture out of? What are the two main ones that come to mind, which we have good examples of in this room, which is why I started here. One is sort of hiding over there. Marble? Where'd he go? Marble. Bronze and marble. Yeah. And, you know, bronze, great detail. You can get clarity. You have a lot of flexibility with size. Marble, when it first was being used, was prized for its snowy, white complexion. Very lifelike, good for people. The most prized marble comes from the, Mediterranean area. And so that was it gave life to figures, it gave a lot of definition, and of course it was beautiful. You've all seen the beautiful white marbles. So, I think that we're lucky to have all that we have in the museum, and I'm just going to quickly end with one of my favorite stories about ancient Greek sculptor, and a story which you may or may not know. It's the ancient Greek sculptor Praxiteles, and he was like the Picasso of the day. He was the man about town, he was a very good sculptor. He's dated back to about the 4th century BCE. We don't know exactly the time of his death or birth. But his most famous work was a depiction of the Venus of Cnidus. And that's kind of like this piece that you've seen pieces of like all over the world. This was sort of like the first standing depiction of Venus. The original is gone, long lost, but there are many, many, many depictions of it. And it's sort of evolved, but it was that she's at her, we call it toilette, doing her hair and her bath. And this was one of the original pieces with a lot of copies. So the story is that he was working on it, and he had this huge workshop. He was, like I said, he was a very well-known sculptor. And he had a very jealous girlfriend named Phryne. And she used to accuse him of being more in love with his sculptures than with her. And no. But, he's still got a million of his different lady sculptures in his workshop. So she says, I'm going to figure something out. I think he's lying to me. She sends one of her, slaves in at the time, because she had that, her servants, and set fire to his workshop. Guess what? He ran in, and the first thing he did was saved that Venus. So I guess the moral of this story is the sculpture is the most important thing of all. So I'll end there.
Thanks so much, Jane.
Oh, the Lost Bird Project, and I'm going to let you stay in the shade, and I'm going to wear my sunglasses so I can see what I'm doing. Thank you, Jane, for what you just said, because that's a really helpful description about how to be thinking and talking about sculpture. I wanted to share a little bit of background about not only looking at the works, but a little bit of background, which you may be familiar with, about the artist and the Lost Bird Project. So what do we see here? We've got this group of 5 bird figures. Are they life-size? No. They are made at a human scale, not the size of actual birds. Do these look like real birds? No. This is not a naturalistic work with any kind of biological detail in it. It's rather, these are shapes, which I would argue are aiming to capture the presence or the essence of the birds and to make them palpable to us. Are they the color that birds might be? They're black. No. And they're black with this very smooth surface, bronze surface. Almost sort of looks the way stone that's been polished from being touched. And I think for many of us, this looks like a memorial. Black figures, it is a memorial, and something that is eliciting in us, I think, a sense of loss, a mood of melancholy, and at the same time it's a recognition and an affirmation of beings that have existed before us. You all may be familiar, the 5 species here, the 5 different species. Each of these birds occupied a unique niche in the North American landscape, and they all became extinct in modern times within the last 100 years. And they are going from left to right, vaguely. The heath hen, the Labrador duck, at the back, the passenger pigeon, and in front of it, the Carolina parakeet, and then at the end, the great auk. And each of these, for some different reason, whether it was deforestation or being overhunted, or there was other adverse impacts to the ecosystem in which they lived, they all disappeared. This artist is Todd McGrain, who made these sculptures under the aegis of what is called the Lost Bird Project. Todd McGrain actually was trained as a geologist and has been a geologist at school. He's been a sculptor for 25 years. He's a great bird lover, and he had been given by an ornithologist friend a book called Hope is a Thing with Feathers, a personal chronicle of vanished birds. And Todd just began thinking a lot about birds that had been driven to extinction in modern times. He sort of started off being sort of very interested to learn about the Labrador duck, which died out in upstate New York, right near where Todd lives. So he sort of started thinking about the Labrador duck and studied other birds. And he decided for this project, this memorial project, he was going to pick 5 different bird species which collectively would represent a variety of different forms and shapes that lived in very different habitats and that became extinct for different reasons. And he works very much at the intersection of science and art because he did a lot of ornithological study, natural history study of these species to learn about what these birds had been and what happened to them. He consulted with ornithologists, other biologists, curators at natural history museums to learn where these birds had been last seen. He read the journals of early explorers. He studied specimens of birds in museums. And he made drawings and studies and visited each site where each bird had last been seen. He negotiated with state and national parks to arrange to have a sculpture to each bird installed at the location that's associated with the bird's decline. These are bronze casts. He produced, for starters, a small clay model, and then made a full-size clay model, and then did the lost wax bronze casting process. And there is, so we're fortunate to have the whole group here together, but each bird sculpture has been installed at the place where they were last seen. The Labrador duck is in upstate New York. The great auk is on Newfoundland. The passenger pigeon is in Columbus, Ohio. The Carolina parakeet is in Okeechobee in Florida. And the heath hen is on Martha's Vineyard. This project was produced, I think it was 2014, and he also had this group, this suite of sculptures installed at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. It was there for about a year. Todd is artist in residence at Cornell's Laboratory of Ornithology, which you may know is a world leader in the study and conservation of birds. And as a sculptor, he is very fascinated with form, with the interaction of time and process and material. He is creative director of the Lost Bird Project, which is this group that is continuing to make other other art that is memorializing or drawing attention to species that are at risk. Let me just read to you, and this is all in the notes I've submitted, so you'll have it. Let me just read a description about the purpose of the Lost Bird Project. The belief that underlies the initiatives of the Lost Bird Project is that art can touch each of us in a way that ideas and intellect alone cannot. At their highest levels, the performing arts and the visual arts have the power to ignite an awareness of deep connectedness. While we do not advocate for any specific actions, our hope is that by raising this awareness, each of us will hear and respond to our own unique calling to engage with the shift toward a better relationship with the earth, which I think is a lovely description of so much of what this museum is about as well. So I will just close with, I thought it might be a kind of inspirational or meditative thing, to read Emily Dickinson's poem, Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard. And sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Thanks.
All right, guys. So come a little bit closer, everyone. Yeah. So I have a question for everyone. Pretend like it's 1,000 years ago, and this open space right here is filled with millions and millions of bison. And you're looking through this hole and you're seeing this landscape just filled with these magnificent beasts. If you're imagining that, what is one emotion that comes to mind when you're seeing this, transported back in time? Okay. Any other emotions? Fear? Like if you're in the middle being trampled? Yeah. Anyone else?
Power.
Power. I like it. Okay.
Sadness that they're not here anymore.
Interesting, yeah, definitely. So this sculpture is meant to evoke all of those emotions. The sculpture is Buffalo Mountain, made in 2015 by artist Stuart Steinhauer, Canadian artist, born 1952. And his last name is not immediately indicative of his native heritage. So Steinhauer is Scotch-Irish, but he's also Cree, Anishinaabe, which is from the Great Lakes area, and Mohawk, which is part of the Iroquois Confederacy of the Northeast. So he has a lot of native traditions that he draws upon that influence him in his artwork. So a discussion of this work of art and its sculpture involves the telling of two Native American stories that explain the existence of a mysterious creative energy and alternate dimensions. This sculpture, as the artist says, is brought to you not by him, but by a place called Turtle Island and the Rock Spirit. So his gift comes not from what his Scotch-Irish ancestors call an individual artistic talent, but he says his gift comes from his native heritage. It's a spiritual gift. So it's not talent, it's a spiritual gift. It's not artistic talent. His words, coming to consciousness with my indigenous lineage is a journey out of the small me into the large we. Creative individuals become conscious of the swirling pool of creative forces and recognize our place in it. So because of this, he says he is a person who, quote, inadvertently makes stuff. So he's an egoless artist who claims his artistic talent from the spiritual energy, not from his own, I guess, artistic background or influence. The story, he says that this spiritual gift and mysterious creative energy derives from a place called Turtle Island. Turtle Island is part of the creation myth of the Iroquois Confederacy, from which the Mohawk tribe is from, part of his heritage. And the story goes that before humans were on the earth, there were the Sky People. And the Sky People lived above in a place of harmony. There was no death, there was no birth, there was just happiness and no conflict. So one day, one of the Sky women became pregnant. None of them had become pregnant before. She told her husband, who became very angry. And so there was this great apple tree that held up the Sky People's world, and it lit the sky. Beautiful, huge, massive earth tree, apple tree. And so the husband became so angry that he ripped a hole in the roots of the apple tree. And the curious Sky woman leaned in to see what was below, and he pushed her through. Not a very nice husband. And so as she was falling to earth, she looked down and realized there was no land. It was just water. So she knew that she was going to drown. She was falling and falling and falling, and two giant birds saw her, caught her in their wings, and slowly lowered her down to the waters where a giant sea turtle, Turtle Island, was waiting. So she landed on the sea turtle, and all the animals of the world came to try to help her. They dove down deep into the waters to try and find dirt to bring back up to make a place for her to live. And one after the other, the animals failed until a little muskrat came up, swam way down, and was able to bring up enough soil from the depths of the water that she could create the continent that we know today as North America. And this is Turtle Island. So the artist draws his spiritual energy from this creation myth. And we talk about the hole in the apple tree in the world from which she fell, the Sky Woman fell, maybe conceived of as this hole through the bison to this world. So the Iroquois people hold a great respect for animals. This is mirrored in their creation myth by the role that animals play, helping us. Without the animals' help, the Sky Woman may have sunk to the bottom of the sea and the earth would not have been created. So this belief rings true today. We need animals to survive. They aid us in our survival. They deserve our respect and protection. This idea is the inspiration behind the sculpture Buffalo Mountain. So Buffalo Mountain, so I mentioned that Stuart Steinauer belongs to multiple native traditions. So he pulled from his Iroquois ancestors in the creation myth of Turtle Island, but he also pulls from his Cree ancestors, and that the rock spirit helps drive his sculptures. So Buffalo Mountain refers to an ancient Cree story explaining the disappearance of great herds of buffalo. When the last of the herds were seeking shelter from manslaughter, a spiritual being known as Rock Grandfather opened a passageway through the mountains, leading to an alternate dimension. So again, we have these passageways from one world into the other. They are suspended in the past, the buffalo wait for a time of safe return. So children climbing all over this sculpture, you can see that in them as hope for the future, where the buffalo return and we live in peace with the world's animals. So when we look through this sculpture, we see a land of potential hope, of return, of renewal, a place where we're living in peace instead of discord with animals. So it can be sort of be seen as a healing sculpture as well. And when people climb through it, hopefully they have that in mind. And so another quote from the artist. As he claims creative energy from Turtle Island, he also claims direction from the rock spirit, who provides raw materials. The rock spirit provides the raw materials from which he works through dreams and visions, and he also energizes and enlightens through ceremony. So he says, sitting in the darkness of a sweat lodge, face to face with the glowing red warm rocks fresh from the fire, now that's my idea of a good time. So yeah, really fascinating sculptures. And you notice I'm sitting on the sculpture. Your experience of a work of art really changes when you're actually able to touch it, to feel its texture, to become a part of it in a way. So that's really what makes this piece so special. So really encourage kids to play on it, tell them that it's out here, tell them the story behind it. It's pretty exciting.
So is that all, that's all one piece of stone, right?
Yes, he carves from the rock.
Yeah, so it's all the same.
It's all one piece. And this is Little Buffalo Mountain right here.
All right. Thanks.
But if you were to describe this sculpture in one word, what would it be?
Sleek.
Sleek. That's a good one. Stylized. So Simon Gudgeon is known for his very smooth, sleek, simplified or stylized forms. You don't see the details on the feather. You don't see a detail around the eye. It's a hole that goes all the way through. Negative space is a word that someone might have said had we started from that side. That space formed by the head arching down, the neck arching down, and the beak touching the chest forms this beautiful negative space through which you can see the clouds and the sky. Very smooth. I think somebody said smooth initially. That's what Simon Gudgeon is known for. He's a British artist born in 1958. He lives just outside of London, not Hyde Park, but Dorset is his town. He is relatively new to this museum. This was the first and maybe only piece we have of his in our collection, although he's become a Western Visions artist, and you may have seen him when Amy was scrolling through. He was on that list of Western Visions artists who will be involved this fall. He has this beautiful sculpture park where he lives outside of London, in Dorset. It's called Sculpture by the Lakes. If you ever go there, I recommend visiting. I have not, but I've looked. You can go online and see a film. Has anybody here ever visited Sculpture by the Lakes? Seen it online. So I think I remember him telling me that you need to, they don't want too many people there at once, so you have to reserve a spot on any given day. They try to keep the numbers down, kind of like Lawrence Rockefeller Preserve for the experience. But it seems like a beautiful place, 26 acres. The way that our museum connected with Simon Gudgeon was through Jen Lee, who used to be in charge of Western Visions. And she saw his work somewhere, I don't remember where, but she thought, I'm going to invite him to see if he wants to participate in Western Visions. That was how he became friends with this museum, and he actually donated this piece. He loved this place so much. He heard we were creating a sculpture trail, and this was one of the very first summer, maybe 3 different pieces were installed. We of course had a few pieces that were already outside and became part of the sculpture trail, but this was one of the first pieces acquired specifically for the sculpture trail, and it was donated by Simon and his gallery in London, which is the Halcyon. What else about this piece? It was done in 2009. When he was here, when we unveiled this piece that first summer of the sculpture trail, he said there is only one other of this size. Maybe that's changed, but in 2009 there was only one other in the world of this size, and that was in Hyde Park in London, and it was the first sculptural piece by a living artist ever installed in Hyde Park, which was quite an honor. He told us when he was here that there's a smaller version that was purchased by Prince Charles, and it's in outside his private home. It's smaller than this. I remember when they had the London Olympic Marathon, I remember seeing in Hyde Park runners going past this sculpture, so it must be in a pretty prominent location. But Simon is fabulous. I recommend when he's here for Western Visions, which I do believe, I'll have to confirm this with Amy, but I think he's planning on coming back. He just loves our museum. He loves coming to visit, so hopefully we'll get to see him and have a chance to talk to him in the fall when he comes back for Western Visions. But I'm going to keep it short and sweet.